Okay, so hello, Year 7. I hope that you're all well and that you're all coping and getting on okay at home. I just thought I'd put this little video presentation together for you on the topic of metamorphosis. So you'll remember just before school closed, we were doing some work in class on the idea of metamorphosis. And what I would like you to do is to write a description of a human being turning into an animal. And we looked at some examples of this in class. And this is an idea which is known as metamorphosis. So, for example, you could write a description of a human being turning into a giraffe. So the idea of this presentation is that it will take you through all the different steps that you'll need to be successful on this task. And if you've got any questions at all, then you can send me an email or drop me a message in Teams, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I possibly can. So you're going to be doing this piece of writing, and this just shows you how you're going to be marked on this as well. So this is what's called a mark scheme. This is what I'm going to use to give you some feedback eventually. So you need to think about your communication and content and communicating your ideas really well. Organization. So you need to just remember about paragraphs and dividing your work up into paragraphs. That's really important to keep your work really well organized. Vocabulary and spelling as well. So make sure that you're looking up some of those key spellings and reading through your work and just checking what kind of words that you've used. Try and use some really good descriptive words if you can. And then also look at your sentence structure and punctuation. So if you remember when we did the Gothic work, we talked about using things like a mixture of long and short sentences, for example, using a little bit more complex vocabulary, for example. And these are all things that you can do to challenge yourself in this piece of writing. So what this presentation is going to go through is 6 different steps to help you to be really successful in this. And the last step, obviously, is writing out your story. So the first thing just to go through is, what do we mean by metamorphosis? So we looked at this in class, didn't we? And a metamorphosis literally means the process of change. It means transformation. So this actually happens naturally in the animal kingdom. So if you think about, for example, a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, that's an example of metamorphosis. Or if, say, a human being was turned into a frog, then that would be a metamorphosis. And quite often in writing, this is associated with magical stories, for example. So somebody might drink a potion, for example, and it might have an effect where they might turn into an animal, for example. So if you, I know some of you at the moment are reading Harry Potter series while you're at home. In some of the Harry Potter books, we see quite a lot of examples of metamorphosis. So, for example, the character Sirius Black turns into a dog, and really famously, when we watched that video in class, Remus Lupin turns into a werewolf. We also see a little bit of metamorphosis in the Chamber of Secrets as well, when Harry and Hermione and Ron take the Polyjuice potion, and Harry and Ron turn into Crabbe and Goyle, I think it was, and then Hermione, it all goes wrong and she ends up getting turned into a cat because there was a cat hair in the potion. So that's what we mean by metamorphosis. So that's something that you can use to inspire you within your writing when you eventually do that. So there's a little bit of what we call the etymology of where the word comes from, just for you to have a look at. And of course, I think you wrote about that in your books as well. So there are some really good examples of metamorphosis in literature. We've got Lupin transforming into a werewolf, and that's a really great scene in the film, and it's really, really good in the book as well. And you can just pause this presentation now and you can actually read some of these extracts. So here's one from Harry Potter and the Prison of Azkaban when Lupin turns into a werewolf. So you can look at some of the description there. It's a really, really lovely description, this actually. You can think about how J.K. Rowling makes the sort of transformation quite gradual. And if you just put that into YouTube as well, you can actually watch that clip and you can see there that the transformation is really very, very vivid and very, very stark, and there's some great description in it as well. And this is also an example from the Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets when Harry takes the Polyjuice potion as well. So you can use some of these ideas, you can pause that, you can read that, some of those ideas to inspire you in your work. So what kind of features do you need to include? Well, we're looking for some really good description. So I'd like you within your work to give some context to what's happening with your description. So what that means is, what is it that's led up to somebody being turned into an animal. So if somebody is going to be turned into a giraffe, for example, or a lion, or a giant panda, or a squid, or something like that, then what's led up to that? You know, is it that they've taken a potion? Have they been cursed, for example? Have they been struck by a bolt of lightning? What is it that actually causes that metamorphosis? Are you going to have any other characters within your description that are going to witness this metamorphosis? The other thing to do is outline the different steps that happens in the description. So you don't want your transformation, your change to happen too quickly in your writing. So you want to think about the different steps, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. It's probably best to write in the first person, which means that you tell it from your point of view. So you're going to use words like I, okay, and about how it happened to you. Use what's called figurative language, and I'll talk about that. And then use sequencing language and ly verbs as well to show how things happened, how one thing leads to another within your work. So there's some of the steps that you might want to include. These are examples of figurative language, so it's really, really good to try and put some of this within your work. And they're all things that have been looked at in our lessons this year as well. So things like metaphors, for example, which is a use of descriptive language when you say something is something else. Personification, when we give personality to things maybe in nature that aren't actually human. Simile is when you say that things are like or as something, so as cold as ice, for example. Onomatopoeia is really useful as well, so you could think about in your descriptions making it really vivid. So you could use words like crash or pop or swish and things like that, just to really add that drama into your writing. Alliteration is when we have description where we use the same letter at the start of each word within a sentence. So evil eagles eat eels. Idioms, well-known sayings. Hyperbole is the use of exaggeration. So they're all different features of figurative language. So you might want to look at that and try and include some of those ideas in your description. One of the things that I really want you to try and do in terms of planning for this, for another step, is to plan out your description. So rather than just thinking that within 2 seconds a human being is suddenly going to turn into a giraffe, what might be the different stages that they might go through? And we looked at this in class, and you all actually plan that out in your books. So that would be a really good thing. You could almost storyboard it. So what's going to be the first thing? So if you're a human being and you're going to turn into a giraffe, what's the first thing you might notice? So it might be, for example, that you start to get different giraffe colours on your skin, for example. Okay, it might be that your arms start to turn into legs, for example, and you might leave the sort of long neck right towards the end, because that's probably going to be the most dramatic bit. So you want to plan out, the different things that are going to happen. Look at that Remus Lupin turning into a werewolf, how he gradually goes through those different stages. So that would be step 4 to think about. And then step 5, so think about, right, what is the context of your story? So where are you going to set your story? Is it going to be in a beach? Is it in a forest, for example? Is it in a house? Is it on the side of a street, for example? Where's your story going to be set? What causes the metamorphosis to take place? So you might have some really interesting ideas about that. Are there any other characters around that are going to react to what's happening? So if you think about, again, the Remus Lupin scene, there's lots of different characters around, so that might add a sense of drama. People might be shocked by what's happening. People might be shouting. And then what happens at the end of your description? So can you end the story in a really interesting and dramatic way? So the last step to take is to write out your story. So I want you to try and write about 2 sides of A4. If you decide to word process it, then it's probably not going to be 2 sides, but I want you to kind of think about that kind of length. So it's maybe around about 500 words, something like that. That's not a limit. You could go maybe a little bit more than that. But these are the following checklists I want you to think about to make this a really great piece of work. So background to why your character is going to transform. Use the features of figurative language within your work. Make the transformation when it starts to happen slow and dramatic. Use that sensory language to explain how the character feels as well. So does the character or yourself within it feel frightened? You're going to write it in the first person. You're going to use paragraphs to break up your work, and you're going to include how other characters within it might react to your transformation. So really good luck with this. It might be worth drafting out some ideas for your story first, and maybe asking if somebody can have a little look at it and offer some suggestions. But as I said, if you do have any questions, send me an email or just pop me a message on Teams. But hopefully this has been useful to just show you what you need to do. Thank you very much. Goodbye.